So in a similar vein, but what gets special attention is guest access. And we kind of have three scenarios for that. And I need to skip to the next one. The first one is referred to as hotspot. And that is just purely internet access. Now, what it allows you to do is follow some best practices around general just guest internet access. In particular, this terms and conditions, access user policy or something like that. Basically, I can ask somebody to, hey, make sure I will give you internet access. I will give you internet access under the agreement that you're not performing any kind of illegal activities that I will be held liable for at some point. Great. They accepted those terms and conditions. Some kind of custom splash page can be made to reference that. As soon as they click I agree, they're given access. It's a small step beyond just having wide open access. This is not so much network security so much as legal security, which is of equal importance. So that is the first kind of offering for guest access in particular. A second kind of offering is what's referred to as self-registered, which gives us a little bit more visibility, right? I had those questions that I was kind of asking, who, what, where, when, why. I can't get all those answered if I'm just using the hotspot type of guest access, right? Here I'm collecting a little more information. I might be able to give more access because now I have some kind of account that's associated with this device. I might say, hey, I'll give you a week's access if you register. I know who you are. You can come and go. Great. Here's your access. The last one that we'll see, and this is the most stringent, most secure, but offers the most visibility and control, is this idea of sponsored. And that is where some member of your organization will actually go into a crafted portal and say, I would like to sponsor somebody who is coming to our location and needs wireless access. So now, if you visit an NSI office, or if you visit a Cisco office, you will be given some kind of sponsored access. It is a specific username and password for you to use to gain access to the network. You can still put, it's guest network, so I'm just giving internet connection at this point. But I can also put maybe more generous time allowances. So, for example, like I want to connect my cell phone to NSI's company network, to our company Wi-Fi. I'm not given access to the company network, but I was able to get a sponsored account that's good for 180 days. So now the organization's able to give me that and is confident that I'm the one that's using that access without me having to log in constantly or accept terms and conditions, right? So that is kind of the third iteration of guest access, sponsored. I talked about this a little bit before. One of our other use cases, so again, we don't have to consume all of these use cases at once. That's where some of the complexity comes from. You can imagine defining all these policies and these access and deploying the access control for all of these use cases. But once we get past wired and wireless and VPN, and once we take a look at guest, or even prior to those steps, we can start to look at asset visibility and enforcement. So some of the things that we're looking for here is, for example, I could write a policy that says, hey, I identify that this is an iOS or Android device. Now I know we're purely a Chromebook shop, so this is clearly some kind of guest device at this point. So if you're iOS or Android, boom. IoT devices could be assigned automatically to an IoT segment. I may work with a specific manufacturer. I know the first bits of the MAC address are going to be a certain set of characters. And so I just write a policy that says, hey, anytime we see devices from this manufacturer, boom, it goes into this. So some of that visibility, we're querying the device, we're querying the supplicant or one of our other pieces of data. We can start to write policies to automatically and consistently apply some kind of segmentation to this. additionally, you're just going to get more information. I was working, this is going back a little while, but did a presentation. Somebody came up to me afterwards, and they said, yeah, so-and-so would be great. I've got like 45 devices at the house. And I thought, wow, 45, that's quite a few devices. I don't think I have 45. Well, I run Meraki networking at my house, and I went in my dashboard and I said, oh, wow, I thought I had like 12. Turns out I have 32. So there's a lot of devices that end up on our networks, and I happen to do networking, so you think I know better. But there's a lot of devices that end up on our network that we may not even have awareness of. But now we're going to force them to authenticate to some capacity and gain a lot of visibility into those devices. So some examples here, you can see the contextual awareness that comes out of this process. All of a sudden, I start to know, instead of just this IP address of 192.168.2.101, which is probably the majority of what we're capturing today, right, without any kind of access control. Now I know who it is, what it is, when they connected, where they were coming from, how they connected, the different applications that they might be using, and some software specifications within that. There's a much richer pool of data for us to make policy decisions and whether we should grant access and what kind of access should be given. Let's talk about, in that vein, compliance. We might have standards for operating systems. Skippy Smith, in our little story there, had a Windows 7 laptop. Well, maybe I want to permit personal devices, but sorry, not Windows 7 at this point, right? I can start to run compliance requirements on operating systems, on system patches. Are you up to date, or are you 6 months behind? We can print out a splash page, say, hey, we're not going to allow this device based on standards. Contact your support team. Maybe anti-malware signatures aren't up to date. Maybe the desktop firewall is not enabled. Well, I would really like that to be the case. Maybe they were troubleshooting, such as our IT tech extraordinaire, and they identified that the software firewall, if I turned it off, that'll help restore this connectivity. Well, yes, it will, but now we've compromised our security, and that's not the way we want to fix devices. So the next time that device connects, we're going to identify, hey, sorry, you're not allowed access. Bring your own device. This one, some organizations don't allow it. It's just a hard no. One, how do you enforce that? Two, maybe you do allow bring your own devices. You have that requirement for whatever reason. Well, how are we going about handling registering those devices, making sure that the supplicant's responding properly? I might do some kind of installation of a certificate to identify, I've registered the device now, he's good to go. They've given us the information we need. Again, without a tool similar to ICE, this becomes really difficult to pull off. Device administration. So we have a number of switches, routers, firewalls, wireless controllers in our networks, and they all have access that we can log into using those usernames and passwords. Well, it's a device with an operating system on it that can be compromised the same as any other device. We tend to think about them less, but I likely want to make sure that those devices, which make up my infrastructure, are doubly secure, we'll just say. So device administration allows us to centralize that user authentication. So each individual person can log in with their own credentials, and we can remove those, so on. There's generally two methods for leveraging this. One is radius, which is just general, like, do you have access? Do you not have access, right? A second one that Cisco supports is TACACS. And with TACACS, you can give per user permissions. So one of the challenges in our story was David's came along and decided, here's a server, the firewall is on, I need to disable that. Maybe David shouldn't have the ability to make those configuration changes. Maybe he should have the ability, because he's one of the techs, to look and analyze and troubleshoot but not actually make those changes. That needs to go through our change control process. It needs to be validated by somebody. And so that particular account is not going to be given the ability to make those changes. Part of device administration. Segmentation. This is one I think we've architected for this well. How many people have multiple VLAN subnets in their network that are designated? Maybe data, maybe voice. You probably got a few wireless networks. They all land on a different subnet. Now, how do you segment those? The intent is maybe with some ACLs, maybe through some firewall policies. How is that maintained? How is that updated from time to time? And you start to see some lag in the environment oftentimes from what the intended policy was to what our actual segmentation ends up being. So with ICE, we can start to define those policy groups through some downloadable ACLs. There's different ways we can do that. But it gives you this kind of central point of authority to define those policies and make sure they're being applied consistently. And if you have a change in policy, well, no problem. We can go to ICE, change that downloadable ACL, maybe change the security group tags that are being applied. That part gets a little technical, but we got some tools to enact those different policies. All right, I'll go through this one quickly, but then it starts to get fun. So I've got access control rolled out. Maybe it's for wired, maybe it's for wireless, maybe for both, guest access, VPN, what have you. I'm gaining a lot of visibility into the environment. Now I want to start to share some of that information with some of my other security tools. I might want to share what kind of device type I'm seeing this particular device is. When they were given access, what their posture is, right? What are those software instances that are running on there, the operating system, so on. And so I got my access control tool. Well, let's let it talk to the firewall. Let's let it talk to my endpoint security. Let's let it talk to my email filter. And vice versa, let's let them talk to ICE and maybe make some authorization access changes based upon what they're seeing. And so that is kind of our final use case, is rapid threat containment, which goes through and uses that integration to basically say, hey, endpoint security identified that it's seeing a process running on the machine that is known malware to us. Can we get that off the network? Can we get it as quickly as possible? Would be ideal. And so it's going to issue notification to ICE, and ICE will push down what's known as change of authorization. And maybe we just punt them from the network entirely. Sorry, you cannot come on. Maybe we just we'll give them internet access still, but that's it. They're not allowed to connect to anybody else in the environment. They get put in a quarantine VLAN until we're able to remediate that issue. So that is rapid threat containment and some of the exciting pieces.